If you have your sights set on medical school, your transcripts and GPA and MCAT scores can only partially convey all the work you've invested towards this goal. Everything else, the hours upon hours of research, shadowing, clinical experience, and more, also carry a lot of weight in your admission decision. It's up to you to represent those experiences well in your AMCAS Work and Activities section. In this video, I'll explain all 19 of those AMCAS Work and Activities section categories so you know exactly what Adcoms are looking for. Then I'll show you how to organize your own experiences into the appropriate categories so you can showcase all of your skills, qualifications, and accomplishments in the best light. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated on all the new content we'll be sharing as you navigate your med school admissions journey. Also, here are a few things to keep in mind as we make our way through all 19 work and activities categories. First, be aware that the following categories are the ones that most med school adcoms consider to be most essential: physician shadowing, research, and community service/volunteering, both medical or clinical and not medical or clinical. Additionally, note that while patient exposure doesn't have its own category in the work and activities section, it's extremely important that some of your experiences reflect it. As I go through each category, I'll point out a few where patient exposure is most commonly mentioned. And after watching this video, if you want to check out several examples of full-length work and activities entries and experience descriptions, check out our in-depth guide by clicking here. All right, let's get started. I'll be going through the work and activities categories alphabetically, which is the same way they're listed in AMCAS. Category 1 is artistic endeavors. Even though pre-med students can sometimes be stereotyped as hardcore STEM, I know that many students, and perhaps you, are also skilled in the arts. Adcoms always notice when a student has invested time in a unique interest or skill, whether it's connected to medicine or not. This category is a great place to display more unique experiences that could help you stand out. A couple examples of experiences that would fall under this category are visual arts like painting, drawing, or animation, and music, dance, or theatrical performance. Category 2 is community service/volunteer, medical/clinical. You want to be sure you have at least a couple different experiences to list under this category. You should also emphasize any patient exposure you had during these experiences. A few examples of experiences in this category include volunteering as a medical assistant, volunteering as a medical scribe, and volunteering with your campus EMT organization. Category 3 is community service/volunteer, not medical/clinical. This is another category you should aim to include in your work and activities section. The possibilities are almost endless here, but a few experiences that fit nicely into this category are coaching a middle school basketball team at the community center, volunteering at the local food pantry, and serving as a camp counselor for students whose family member has a terminal illness. Category 4 is conferences attended. Any conferences you've attended belong in this category. However, if you've also presented at a conference about research or a publication you worked on, it's usually best to categorize those experiences under their own respective categories, which I'll discuss in a moment. If you have an experience that falls into this category, be sure to contextualize it in your experience description. Write about why you chose to attend the conference, and if you were personally invited to attend, mention who invited you. Also, describe what you learned there, who you met, and how it shaped your interests and goals. Category 5 is extracurricular activities. This one's pretty broad, so you might find that some experiences that don't quite fit into any of the other categories fit nicely here. A few examples could include serving on a student government board, writing for a student newspaper, and playing an intramural sport. Category 6 is hobbies. Hobbies, like artistic endeavors, is a very broad category. Of course, hobbies can also be artistic endeavors, so I recommend assigning that category to any art-related hobbies. If you have a lot of hobbies or interests, you might be wondering what's worth including in your work and activities section and what's not. A good rule of thumb is that any hobby to which you devote at least 2 hours per week is worth mentioning here, and everything else can be left out. Exceptions could include seasonal or project-based hobbies for which you devote a significant amount of time during certain parts of the year, but not consistently year-round. A few examples for this category are designing and creating hand-knit clothing items, hosting a food blog, and learning wilderness survival skills for overnight backpacking trips. Category 7 is honors/awards/recognitions. In many cases, you should just mention any honors, awards, or recognitions in the descriptions for the various experiences with which they're associated. But if you happen to have additional honors, awards, or recognitions that are not affiliated with a specific experience you include elsewhere in your work and activities section, feel free to list them here. Be sure to include a brief description of who was handing out the accolade and what you did to receive it as well. In most cases, when you're filling out the hours field for entries in this category, you should just enter 0 because the hours will have already been reflected in the entry for the associated experience. A couple of examples of the types of honors, awards, and recognitions that could fall into this category are membership in an honor society on campus and a community service award you received for your contributions to several different projects. Category 8 is Intercollegiate Athletics. In most cases, the only experiences that belong in this category are NCAA or NAIA sports you've competed in. If you play a club sport that takes up a significant amount of your time, you may include it here, but just be sure to clearly state that it's a club sport in your experience description. And if you play intramural sports or just like to kick the ball around with your friends occasionally, list those experiences under the Hobbies category instead. Category 9 is Leadership, not listed elsewhere. Contrary to popular opinion, it's not completely necessary to have an entry under this category. It's much more important that you concretely demonstrate your leadership qualities in the experience descriptions you write for some of the experiences you've sorted into other categories. But if you happen to have a leadership experience that doesn't fit into any other category, then it probably belongs here. A few examples of these experiences might include organizing workshops to help local elementary schoolers from underprivileged backgrounds boost their reading skills, supervising and mentoring a cohort of freshmen as they take on their first undergraduate research opportunities, and being promoted from an entry level to a management position within the same workplace. In addition to describing your leadership qualities in your work and activities section, you'll have opportunities to cover associated anecdotes in other parts of your application. If you want to learn how to expand on your work and activities section by crafting memorable, standout, personal statement, and secondary essays, look no further than our Personal Statement Premium Example Library and Secondary Essay Premium Example Hub, where you can browse over 1,000 expert sample essays in response to prompts for every medical school in the US and Canada. With that, let's move on to Category 10, which is Military Service. If you have military service experience, this category is a great way to share the skills you learned and the responsibilities you held during your service. It's also a good idea to mention any experiences during your service that may have influenced your decision to pursue a career in medicine. Category 11 is Other. In most cases, if an experience doesn't fall into any of the other 18 categories, that's an indication that it isn't worth mentioning in your work and activities section. This category is a bit of a relic from a time when the work and activities section didn't yet have categories like shadowing/clinical observation and social justice/advocacy, both of which we'll discuss in a moment. If, however, you have an experience you really want to include and it just won't fit into any of the other categories, then you may enter it here. Category 12 is Paid Employment, medical/clinical. Some students think that only unpaid medical or clinical experience is worth mentioning, but that's not true. Don't hesitate to include these experiences, which often involve a lot of patient exposure. A few examples of this include working as a CNA or EMT, working as a phlebotomist, and working as a medical scribe. Category 13 is Paid Employment, not medical/clinical. Any part-time, full-time, or freelance work you've done outside of a medical or clinical setting should be listed under this category. You may think these experiences aren't relevant to your medical school application, but they can actually reveal a lot about your work ethic, character, and sense of responsibility. Just a few employment experiences that would reflect especially well on your application include any customer service-oriented role, any lab-based role, and any role in which you supervised a team. Category 14 is Physician Shadowing/Clinical Observation. I often get the question, how do I list shadowing experiences? There's no prescribed format for disclosing this information, but if you have multiple experiences in this category, it often makes the most sense to combine them and list them as bullet points. If you have one or two experiences in which you learned or observed something particularly notable, you can expand on those a bit more in your experience description. Should you choose to combine experiences when filling out the contact name and contact title fields, just list the contact name and title of the person affiliated with the shadowing experience you'd most like to highlight. The next three categories often overlap. They are presentations/posters, publications, and research/lab. Because any presentations, posters, or publications you'd like to share are likely closely related to your research or lab experiences, you may find yourself repeating some information across these three categories. This is perfectly okay, but just be sure you also provide new information within each experience description that's relevant to the category you've chosen. For example, if you spent 2 years researching alongside one of your professors, which eventually led to giving a poster presentation at a research symposium and contributing to a paper that was published in a research journal, don't hesitate to create 3 separate entries in the work and activity section to describe this experience, each under a different category. Just be careful not to duplicate the hours you put towards that experience. If you spent 300 hours on the research and writing process, enter 300 in the hours field only for the experience you categorized under research/lab. Then enter 0 hours for the related experiences you categorized under presentations/posters and publications. And if you have multiple publications or presentations you'd like to include in your work and activities section, you may also combine them into one entry and list them with bullet points to save space. I recommend including as many publications as possible, including those that have yet to be published, using AMA style, even if it means you need to create 2 separate entries to squeeze them all in. Category 18 is Social Justice/Advocacy. AMCAS has stated that their goal in establishing this new category in 2023 was to support schools in identifying applicants whose experiences align with their school's mission and goals, as well as to help signal to applicants the importance of participating in social justice and advocacy work. That's a pretty clear indication that medical schools really value experiences wherein students contribute to a cause or a movement or champion the rights of marginalized or underrepresented communities. Please note that AMCAS also specifically states that political campaigning should not be included in this category. Instead, a few examples of the types of experiences Adcoms would like to see here are addressing health inequity, advocating for environmental justice or civil rights, and registering people to vote regardless of their political affiliation. And the final category, category 19, is teaching/tutoring/teaching assistant. Any teaching, tutoring, or TAing experience you have should be listed under this category. Only list positions for which you receive pay, credit, or volunteer hours, and discuss in your experience description any leadership or interpersonal skills you learned over the course of your time in these roles. A few examples for this category are volunteering to tutor underprivileged middle schoolers in math, developing curriculum and labs for elementary schoolers interested in science, and working as an undergraduate student instructor for a college-level chemistry class. Well, that's all 19 categories. I hope this gives you a clearer picture of how to best organize your experiences in the work and activities section so you can showcase all you have to offer med school Adcoms. If you still have questions about the work and activities section, like which details should I include in my experience descriptions, or how do I choose my most meaningful experiences, be sure to check out our work and activities FAQ video.